We're going to get started here in about 90 seconds. So if you could find your way to your seats, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Alrighty, folks. We're going to round out the day with our final presentation here. I'd like to introduce Andrew Mease, who's come a bit of a hike from the East Coast to join us, coming from I think, Philadelphia area?
Yeah, right outside Philadelphia.
Great. I'll let Andrew give himself a more thorough introduction, but please welcome Andrew Mease.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you today. My talk is entitled Visibility is Key. They tell you to start presentations with a joke, but I'm a dad, so all I have is dad jokes, so I'm not going to do that. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Andrew Mease. I'm a senior principal security engineer at Comcast. I live with my family, my wife, my 2 kids, and my dog in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is outside of Philadelphia. My career started in 2001 when I graduated from Eastern University, and then I worked for BigChalk.com doing QA for them. I then moved to Mars Incorporated, where I did help desk work first, then Windows administration, then Linux administration, and then I moved to Comcast in 2008. So I've been there for a while, 14 years now. I've been involved in lots of different aspects of security there, including our legacy and next generation antivirus, and a complete overhaul of our email security stack. My current focus over the last couple of years has really been our endpoint agent tooling, including Osquery. So just to give you an idea of the environment that I'm talking about at Comcast, we have hundreds of thousands of agents. We started deploying Osquery in 2019, and we have it deployed pretty much everywhere, including all of our Windows servers, just so you have an idea of what we're talking about here. So the agenda of what we're going to go over first, I want you to take notice of that picture on the left there. It's kind of cloudy and we can't see, so I'll refer back to that later. First, I'm going to go over what I'm calling my storyline, which is really just how we've used Osquery over the last 18 months or so for some of our critical incidents, and those include Exchange, Log4Shell, and Spring4Shell. And then I'll talk about where we're going next with the agent and wrap that up with a nice summary. So I've had multiple colleagues that have done presentations here in the past. They've talked about our Linux efficacy journey and how we use Osquery for compliance and file integrity monitoring. I was speaking to some of those colleagues about what I wanted to talk to you about today. And as we were doing that, we kind of started reminiscing about some of these security incidents that we've had to deal with and how we used Osquery for those. So I thought that would be something good to talk to you about today. So if you can reminisce with me and think back to early 2021, there were a lot of CVEs that were coming out for Exchange at that time. It was all kind of a blur when I was looking at it, and then when I looked back, I think there were something like 20 CVEs that had a 6 or higher score between March and July of that time, with lots of different names like Proxy Logon, Proxy Oracle, Proxy Shell. But if we focus on the left-hand side there, that first vulnerability that came out in March of 2021 was Proxy Logon. Now, the CVEs that I have listed here are really just those that score a 9 or higher on the CVSS 3.0 scale, because there were so many other CVEs, I didn't want to clutter this up too much with anything else, so this is just the really critical ones. Right after that one, we had some vulnerabilities that were reported by the NSA in April, and then Proxy Shell again in July. After that, in early December, we had Log4Shell, which was the early Christmas present, right? And then a couple of days later, because that fix wasn't complete, we got another critical CVE. And then moving up to April, right around April Fools, we had the Spring4Shell vulnerabilities. So now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of these. And I'm going to start off with Exchange. So we get headlines like this And because it's Exchange, it impacts everyone. But we start getting questions from our leadership, like, what is our impact? How much on-prem Exchange do we still have, or is it all in O365 now? And how do we know? Now, how do we really know if we still have some Exchange out there? So to help us with this, we turned to Osquery. And those are some pretty simple queries to find where Exchange was installed, where we saw Exchange processes, and that sort of thing. As part of this, we also incorporated data from our CMDB into Osquery so that we'd be able to pull the application data, asset groups, and that sort of thing in for any future issues with applications. But what I want you to refer to back now is that first slide with proxy logon on the left there. What had happened was we were told by our threat hunter teams that threat actors were using that vulnerability to drop web shells on affected Exchange servers. And so we went ahead and did some assessments, some purple team exercises, and we confirmed that yes, our EDR was not detecting when web shells were dropped, but only when they were executed. So that was a gap. And so for that gap, we also looked to Osquery. And we did that by using a feature called Yara, which has been mentioned many times today already. I know there's been talks on that at this conference in the past. And if you're not familiar with it, it is a pattern matching tool that was created by Victor Alvarez of VirusTotal in 2013. I would suggest looking into it because there are many rules. You can write your own rules. There's community-based rules, and you can also get rules from security vendors for situations just like this. So we were able to take those Yara rules and apply them directly to the Exchange servers that we had identified in the first part. And we did identify some additional Exchange servers that we hadn't found before, some that were in the middle of a decommission process but that hadn't completed. So what do we get from that? Well, we got granular, application-specific protection that was quick and easy to implement. It's something that we wouldn't have had without Osquery. So that was really valuable to us. Now I'm going to move on to Log4Shell. So I just want you to take a moment and read some of those headlines. The internet is on fire. The bug that's breaking the internet. Everything is doom and gloom and all the computers are going to blow up, right? So we get headlines like this and we immediately start getting questions from leadership. And they seem like pretty simple questions, right? Can you tell us where Log4j is and what versions do we have? So that should be really easy, right? We just look for the installed programs, we look for installed RPMs. I see people laughing. I don't know why they're laughing. Who was able to easily tell where their Log4j, vulnerable Log4j versions were? Anybody? I thought someone might raise their hand, but apparently not. So to help with this, we again turned to Osquery. We were able to look for that Jitney lookup class file that was talked about earlier. And we were able to find those vulnerable Log4j versions. We were able to build reports and dashboards and get those to our remediation teams. The problem, we did have some false positives, but that was usually because Osquery wasn't able to read the POM or the database file and pull out and extract that version information for whatever reason. But we also had instances like, for example, we had one instance where someone had renamed that Log4j file, just renamed it to the fixed version number. And just FYI, that actually doesn't fix the vulnerability. But Osquery was able to pull out the actual version information and give it to us and let us know that that threat still existed on that. We also had data for Log4j from other sources, like our vulnerability management system and other agents that were on those systems. But in the vast majority of cases, the data that we got to remediate Log4Shell came from Osquery. I also want to mention that we did utilize Yara again for this in terms of looking for IOCs, and that's because we were running queries every 3 hours to look for that. And along with that, because that data can be dumped into a historical query pack table, that was very useful because as we were engaging application teams or remediation teams, we could see exactly when they remediated something within 3 hours or so. We could tell if something reverted because somebody had restored an image, for example. So that was also very useful to us. So what do we get here? Well, we got jar-specific detections, even inside containers. So that was very valuable and something that we wouldn't have had without Osquery. So moving on to Spring4Shell. Now, when this came out, I was originally hoping that it was an April Fool's joke because it was right around that time. And then, everyone was saying it was going to be as bad as Log4Shell. So we kind of were like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. Thankfully, it really turned out not to be that way, and I think that was because of the complicated mix of prerequisites that it had. But when it was happening, we didn't really know what the severity of it was going to be or how bad it was going to be. So we got the same kind of tough questions for this from leadership that we did for Log4Shell. And we had to go through and design some queries or figure out some queries to take into account those prerequisites because we wanted to be able to feed data to our remediation teams that was accurate. So what do we have to do? Well, we had to look for the Apache Tomcat process that was running. We had to look for JDK and make sure it was higher than version 9. And then if those two were true, we had to look for the Catalina home path and the current working directory and iterate through that and look for all the jar and WAR files, pull those out, then look at the Spring components and take the versions and figure out whether it was vulnerable. We were able to do that and then get that into a report and a dashboard and supply that over to our remediation teams. So everything worked out pretty well with that. So quick recap on those last three things. If you're paying attention, we are able to take Osquery, and once we find out what queries we need in these critical incidents, and get the requisite queries, build reports and dashboards, and get our remediation teams working with accurate data. So where are we looking to next? The first piece is really vulnerabilities. We see a place, and this has been mentioned by a couple other people today, but we see a place for this agent in collecting vulnerabilities in lots of different places, including our cloud environments, containers, but we also see it for some other areas where we have some issues with authentication or where we're not able to scan for whatever reason. The second piece is automation. I mentioned before that we pulled some of the data from our CMDB over into Osquery so that we could tell in the future what applications we were looking at. We've also built some Slack and Teams bots so that end users can go ahead and query the agent status, figure out if the agent is live and what the version is so they don't have to call us about that. But there's some other things that we would like automatic collection of logs or dump files when the agent crashes, automatic reverting to a last known good config when there's some sort of communication problem with the agent. And then the last thing is a minimum version number because we've worked through a lot of different bugs and sometimes we'll have systems come back online if they've been off for a while and they're on an old version and then we get inundated with some alerts because of the old agent. We'd like those to upgrade right away. The next thing is data fidelity. So in high profile incidents like Log4Shell and Spring4Shell, obviously data fidelity is paramount, but it's really paramount in every single thing that we do because every time we are giving data to our remediation teams, we want it to be as accurate as possible so that we're not wasting their time. So we're always trying to make sure that the queries that we're running and the data that we're giving back is as accurate as possible. And then lastly, agent coverage. Everyone wants to say 100% agent coverage. I think I heard people talk about it earlier today already. Of course, it's hard to do, but the way that we're looking at it is integration with some of our other tool sets. So if we have any other agents in certain places, we want to be able to tell if Osquery is not there, why it's not there, if it's a dark area of the network, or what the reason is. So we're really looking to do that through integration with some other tools. So what did we learn today? And if you'll notice the picture on the right now, it's the same path, but it's a lot clearer. There's some clouds, but we can see the path ahead. In summary, Osquery helped us gain visibility with multiple critical security incidents over the last 18 months. It allowed us to find, validate, and then protect Exchange servers. It allowed us to look for files and active processes vulnerable to Log4Shell. It allowed us to confirm a complicated set of prerequisites for Spring4Shell. And in the future, Osquery will allow us to expand vulnerability reporting while improving automation and data fidelity wherever we have agent coverage. The bottom line is that we need as much visibility as we can get wherever we can get it. So everything we do is to improve and maintain that visibility. Increased visibility allows us to determine the risk of new vulnerabilities, respond quickly to any incident, and investigate indications of compromise. It's not even just for security, but for asset management and other use cases as well. In the end, we're going to keep working to keep Comcast safe. Additional visibility can help us do that. You might even say it's the key. Thank you.
In your Spring4Shell, I was just curious what approach you used to determine the JRE versions.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to get back to you with the exact queries that we used. But yeah, I mean, that was a big part because a lot of the time with both Log4Shell and Spring4Shell, the original stuff that we were returning wasn't very accurate. And I mean, at the beginning, it was like, just get us whatever you can. But then, of course, it becomes, this is a false positive. We need you to do a better job. And so we had to go back and refine a bunch of stuff. But yeah.
Quick question. So when you are responding to such serious incidents and so on,
Yeah.
how do you run these real-time queries? Do you blast the whole fleet at a time, or do you follow any strategies?
Yeah,
to
we were
reduce the
running it
impact?
on I think I said we were running it on like a 3-hour schedule for almost all of these. That's pretty much what we did. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So how were you able to confirm with management that the SolarWinds vulnerability didn't backdoor your Osquery?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I have a question of my own, and this is a bit of a tangential one, but you
Sure.
mentioned the Slack bots.
Yeah.
Sort of a curious thing.
Yep.
It helps sort of enforce.
Yeah, I think we
the-
started it with Slack and then we moved it to Teams as well, but our end users can query at any time and just ask it, you know, hey, here's my system IP or here's my system name, and it'll spit back out data about it, like including what the agent's live and what the version is. And we've been improving that. We want to add different things like what asset group it's in, what policy you might have, that kind of stuff, so they can see it.
Who's using this bot today? And
All of our end users, anybody that has it installed. So yeah, I mean, pretty much everyone.
wow, even folks outside of engineering and IT.
Oh yeah, yeah, application owners across the company. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Hey, thank you so much. So
Yeah.
Zach just talked about kind of the inventory versus investigate approach, and I was kind of curious kind of how you guys are doing those two actions. And then I have a second question after that.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've taken kind of a different approach in terms of like, we didn't turn on everything and start pulling everything because a lot of our groups are kind of sensitive to us pulling data that we already get from other places. And so when we rolled this out, we kind of made deals with some of them like, all right, you're already collecting data for this somewhere else. We'll just not run those queries for certain things. And it helped us roll it out faster actually, because then we could even be like, oh, see how lightweight the agent is even now? It's not running any of these queries. Later on, we start turning these things on, especially as we were trying to propose it as like, all right, well, we'll remove that WinLogBeat agent for you if you just let us collect Windows events for you with Osquery. And then you can get rid of that agent. So we're doing that with multiple things where like, oh, you're using something else to collect that? Well, I can collect that for you. You can get rid of that. And then we can turn it on. But it's kind of a political thing. So, yeah.
No, that's great. And my second question was kind of around like, you know, a theme here is that Osquery offers so much context around what we're getting in our telemetry. And I'm curious kind of for the remediation team, do they use any of that extra context for how they take action and just kind of using
Yeah.
that extra context beyond just what you get?
I would have to talk to some of them. I know we've tried to go and build a lot of that. Like we're sending everything from Osquery over to our data lake for them to analyze, and they've built a lot of rules around that. But I mean, they're pulling it from multiple sources, not just Osquery. They're pulling it from our EDR vendor and whatever other agents we have. We're pulling it all together and try to kind of put it all together. So I'm not sure how much they're getting, but we're so siloed and that I'd have to go talk to that team and figure out how they're doing it. Yeah. Yes.
So, assuming a lot of this is about Osquery visibility for your internal infrastructure, have
Yeah.
you all also expanded some of your visibility to the hardware devices? that go out in your consumers' homes?
We have not. Nope, that has not been touched yet. That's a whole other group, like I said. So it all is kind of broken up.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you.
Well done. The last spot of the day, right before the bar opens, is the hardest part, the hardest slot of the day. But Andrew killed it. Thank you very much. That does conclude today's sessions. We've got a packed day tomorrow. Prior to that, this evening we've got a networking and cocktail hour with food, beverages. That's taking place in the observatory at the end of this hallway on the lower level. The Exploratorium is a very neat place, packed with tons of projects and exhibits that you can explore. There is food being served there. There is an oyster display of the native oysters in the area. In this hallway, that's not a food for us. This evening's going on. Usually these events go off flawlessly, and of course ours did. But usually people don't tend to notice the mistakes. There was one. We were supposed to have Taylor Swift and Metallica perform at this networking event. They had to bail at the last minute. But if you guys have a couple of minutes to kill, we'll be able to head down there at 5:30, which is in 18 minutes. In the meantime, if folks want to mingle around, chop it up with each other, and explore some of the exhibits around here. And thank you so much for a wonderful day one, everybody. Appreciate it.